Hi, my name is Timika Chambers, and welcome to another episode of the Seeds We Plant series here on Create a Generational Love Cycle. And it's been a minute, and I just thought about it. I haven't described myself in a bit, have given you a little description about who I am. My name is Timika Chambers. I am an integrated nutrition health coach. I hold BSN and MSN degrees. I have over 20 years of healthcare experience. And as a child, I, like many children, witnessed the generational cycle of pain. I experienced it. But what happened to me as a child is I realized intuitively that this was not the way that we were supposed to live. This is not the life, the abundant life that we're supposed to live. And I believed that I had a right to be loved. And I believed that there's something out there that knew the right path for me to take. And the right path is not going to be just that clean path and you slide in, you get everything you desire, but it's a path of spiritual evolving where you realize the do's and don'ts. You realize that we all have choices to make. Every action is from a choice that we have made. So that's just a little bit about me. I've been talking about weeds. It was back in 2022 where I had a house and garden, and actually we got the house in 2019, and but my garden really flourished, I believe, in 2022, 21, 2022, and I began to see the resemblance in what we plant in the ground, similar to what we plant in our hearts, and how those seeds over time, when nourished, properly nourished, whatever it may be, love, hate, eventually will germinate, and they will grow. We will experience the fruit of those plants. And there are weeds. There are things that will they'll look beautiful, they'll have a great image, and they are the ones that are fighting, if you will, for growth. So when I think about love, and you think about hate. Hate is in our world the opposite, if you will. Some people say there are no opposites, but hate, if you kind of see it as we're talking about this conversation, hate is like the opposite of love, just like courage and fear. And each will want to survive, will want to grow, but it's through what we nourish, what the thoughts that we nourish, the actions. Our actions will actually help cultivate these thoughts. The environment does play a role in that, even though I've talked about that even in an unhealthy environment, you can still flourish, and that's have to do with your thoughts. But how that resemblance plays into our lives, from a little girl who just really adored or just found it fascinating that from a seed, a juicy green grape can come from it, juicy green grapes. Just like from a seed, a thought seed, we can have a spiritually productive life, or we can have one that is not spiritually nourishing to us. Meaning that when I think about spirit, I think about our alignment with our truth. Being today is the weed that I thought about a few days ago to talk about misalignment. And I just want to put a few things on top here, some statements that I want to just kind of give you some food for thought that will play into my discussion on misalignment. Number one is that every action has an accompanying thought or thoughts. That every action, whether we know it consciously or unconsciously, there's a reason why we do what we do. And when we say, well, I don't know could be for various reasons. It could be not wanting to admit the truth. It could be not really knowing thyself. as we need to know ourselves, digging deep into why we do the things we do. But everything, there's an accompanying thought to it, whether it's hidden or it's not hidden. Number two, and I've spoken about this before, individual consciousness seeds into collective consciousness. That even though we are not out there committing some of these violent acts that we hear about, that we see, that we experience, our thoughts, what we have about these experiences, will feed into it. So if we're having fearful thoughts that someone will, rob us, or someone will do something, we are feeding into that fear, violent weed concept, if you will, the concept of fear, just like anger, just like shame and guilt, all of those common weeds, doubt, that we often will hear about or talk about. That and these weeds actually collect, these thoughts continue to collect, like thoughts collect, and they become more, and they continue to attract other thoughts like them. And so when we say, well, I have nothing to do with that, we too have to look at, okay, what kind of thoughts am I feeding into this world? Is it thoughts of love? Is it are there thoughts of fear, anger, shame, and guilt? Because if you think about the wholeness of who we are, that we're yet individual parts, but we feed into one whole, if you will, one whole spirit, one whole thought. Um, of consciousness, individual consciousness, into collective consciousness. And then the third final thought that I have, that I want to throw out there on the table, is that everything starts individually in our own inner gardens. And that's one of the things that I've talked about. That's one of the things I've recently published, The Inner Garden, where I've taken all these 53 life principles that I learned from my mother, and using the garden metaphor, how that affects us individually and as well as collectively. And so that ebook is out, and I'll also to be putting the paperback and the audiobook out. Like, very excited about that. Started that this week. As I've shared that already with my subscribers to my newsletter, Notes on Life, Empower You to Be You. But I want to say I use that garden metaphor because it was so pivotal to, and part of me understanding this generational cycle of pain, is that thoughts, everything boils down to thoughts, or comes to thought, these thought seeds. And at any point, as I was talking to my children this morning, at any point when you think about, and I gave them an example, something that happened on a school bus, and end up being very kind of traumatic. Well, not kind of, but traumatic, where you probably read about it, where a kid actually had shot another person around the same age as him. And through that process, when we think about anything that we do, there are decisions that are made along the way. So decision to, and I'll put it more gently, the decision to read, the decision to pick a book, the decision to finally get that book, and the decision to open the book, the decision to read the book, that every part of what we do, there are choices that are being made. And at any point, we can interject and make another choice. And that choice often will come from a different set of beliefs, for instance, or a different thought. You can have you can make the decision to read a book, but then something comes up and say, well, I better cook because it's getting late and I need to cook. So you go and you cook instead. So there was an interject. And when I talk about the inner garden, when we talk about the generational cycle of pain, we interject or dismantle those thoughts that are leading along that path. That at some point we exercise, and we exercise that self-control of the spirit that resides within us, the spirit that created all things, the stars, the mountains, the ocean, the houses, the ideas that we have to do so many things. that are definitely creative and productive, that we can change the path that we're on by the thoughts that we cultivate, that we nourish, that we eventually express. And so when we talk about misalignment, I use that term loosely because we are aligned to something. We're aligned to something. The misalignment comes when we're not aligned to our truth. So the foods that we eat, the exercise, the violence that we see in the world, the words that we choose to speak, when we choose to help someone or not help them, when we choose to be jealous, when we choose to do actions that may sabotage them, when we choose to go talk to the principal about our child, to advocate for our child, when we choose to buy a book, whatever it is, that we are aligned to some thought, some emotion, whether we choose to be better because of it, or to be bitter because of it. And we think about these opposites. Dr. Joseph Murphy, who I've been reading a lot of his books. I started during COVID reading his book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And at that time, I did not realize all of this work that he had done in basically using somewhat of the garden metaphor and how we can change our thoughts. And his work resonates with me so much. One of the major authors that I have found that, oh my gosh, you're like speaking my language. He talked about not so much in the garden literally and talking about it, but taking parts of it, as I had been working on Cultivate. I started working on that and during COVID, and just started listening to the Master Key System through Rhonda Byrne. Start listening to him again because his name was mentioned, and I realized he has so many different books out there. The Cosmic Power Within You, and one I'm reading, Telepsychics. But if you haven't heard of him, definitely check him out. We talk about this whole thing about our thoughts, and we talk about how we can change our thoughts, and how you think about it. The law of attraction is in this thought. Hearing about the other people that have done this work, Norman Vincent Peale, Dr. Wayne Dyer, and Louise Hay, and her book, and heal, basically healing the body, the power to heal yourself. And so when we think about all these thoughts, we think about everything that we go through. And I think about the life that I have had, and where I've changed my thoughts and something didn't happen. I've changed my thoughts and I got sick, or I changed my thoughts and I didn't get sick, or changed my thoughts and healing, and how that really plays an important role in who we are. And so when we talk about alignment, and we talk about physical expression or verbal expression, we're aligned to something. And so the what it comes down to is our perception of our life events. What do we perceive them to be? Do we perceive that the person is after us, or do we perceive it that this person may have temporarily forgotten who they are? And I used to say that they were lost. It's not about being lost, it's about an awakening. Are they aware? Do they remember who they are? Because we can go through life forgetting those very truths that we know inside of us. Because the longer we continue to nourish and cultivate false information, having to be the image of something, the longer, the further we get away from our truths about situations. The more that we, for instance, use negative words and slander, the more we continue to do that. We continue to call people outside their name. We continue to label people. But when we start to remember that no experience defines people, and that we're all one, and that thoughts feed into other thoughts, and that everyone has the right to live their life, we begin to treat people differently. See, prejudice and racism, and on any form, whether it's gender, color, race, religion, didn't just occur overnight. One of the major things my mom told me is that nothing occurs overnight, and it follows with this seed growth process, that these thoughts are seeded, and eventually we see the physical expression. So how does that affect us overall? For one of the statements that I said is that individual consciousness seeds into collective consciousness. The more that we continue to watch, the more that we continue to say the words that people are saying, the more that we enable certain behaviors, the more that's one, and the more that we think about what we don't want, the more we give power or rise to those thoughts, those behaviors, the more they're likely to happen. Now, I don't want to come across as totally absolute, but knowing that whatever we tend to cultivate, to nourish, we are in a sense expecting, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, expecting that to occur. Because if you go out and you plant a seed and you're growing a garden, if you go out and plant a broccoli seed, you're on some level, your expectation is you're going to have broccoli, you know. So we do things, we tend to do things, we tend to watch for, even you say, well, I just want to see what happens. There is some level of expectation, or else you would not be doing what you're doing. So when we talk about individual consciousness, that we know that whatever we hold in our minds, the thought patterns, the expectations, the words that, and out of that, the words we speak, the actions, the things that we do, we're either feeding into what we see in the world, or we are rejecting it. We're saying, you know what, I'm not going to watch that. I'm not going to say that. We begin to have, and the word that my children were, I try to pick a word a week, and the word is dignity. And I told them this morning, you want to associate dignity with self-control. And I believe that within us is the power, unless there, and I even have to use this loosely when I say medical. There are medical reasons. I understand as a nurse, there are medical reasons why, people may have bladder problems, or medical reasons if they're on medications. I get that. I understand that portion of it. But I also, too, if we are capable, there is an amount of self control. I've seen it where people are on medication and they still had a certain amount of self control. I'm not saying I know everybody. I just use that word loosely, and knowing there is typically some level of self control. And it's not about feeling guilty. It's not about shame. It's not about that. But if we do have some level of self control, and we can choose the things that we want to continue, the things that we don't want to continue, it's a process. Switching from a behavior that is unhealthy to healthier, there is a process, often, that we have to now grow other seeds, seed thoughts, that whatever it may be that I am worthy, that I deserve to be a right weight. When you're tired of being tired, it's like, okay, I need to eat different foods. I need to eat more aligned foods. And so when I talk about alignment, misalignment is when we're aligned to emotions like anger, fear, shame, guilt, when our actions are based on that. Because when that happens, we are misaligned from the truth. So we either will be aligned to our emotions, our thoughts, and that can be in a healthy way, in an unhealthy way, depending on the actual seeds that we are aligning to, that we're catering to, if you will. Or we can be aligned to our truth. That just because someone does something or says something that is that could be perceived as belittling or slanderous or bitter, does not mean I need to act that way. That I know I am not those things. Therefore, I do not cater to those things. I do not give them power. I do not nourish them. And so when we end with the thought that everything starts, and if you can say everything starts and ends individually in our garden, it is through those thoughts that we can choose to align with our truth or not align with the truth. And that's where we get misalignment. And so when we talk about this on another level, what are you aligned to? And often, whatever we're aligned to will show in our lives. It will show and often in our experiences. It will show in how we're feeling every day. Am I giving rise to fear, or am I giving rise to courage? How am I approaching my days? And when we talk about the seeds we plant, whatever we're planting in our garden, and especially if we have children or come in contact with children, we will give rise to that through what we speak, through what we do, through how we treat other children, even our own. And that's the wonderful thing about being a parent or a caregiver, because in that principle, whatever you teach, you reinforce within yourself, you cultivate within yourself, you nourish within yourself. And so that is an important role. And it could be whether it's unhealthy or healthy, it could be consciousness or unconsciousness. As we are raising the next generations, they too will show us the fruit of our labor through their actions. And so that in itself becomes that cycle, that life cycle, that what we give out and what we see, and how we decide to choose to change that so we can start producing more of this spiritual fruit that is in alignment with its spiritual essence, its divine essence. And how do we know that? Well, again, we look at our actions. We hear what resonates with us. Is our child talking about violence or danger or fearful? Or are they talking about how to respect others? Are they showing respect to themselves? Proper hygiene? Are they speaking to others? Are they helping people when they see someone in need? What are we seeing in our children is often, or can be often, a reflection of what we're giving out, what we're producing out of our own garden. And so, just to wrap up, the things that I've talked about today is that every action has an accompanying thought, and that we have to know that they come from somewhere, whether we're conscious or unconscious of it. And individual consciousness seeds into collective consciousness, and everything starts in our own inner garden. It's by the beliefs, the thoughts that we live by that will we eventually see in the world. We see things that are helpful, we see organizations that are thriving, and we also still see a lot of this violence in the world, a lot of things that we want to come to an end. And we have to ask ourselves every day, how am I feeding into what's going on? What thoughts am I having? Am I having fearful thoughts? Am I having shameful thoughts, guilty thoughts? Because a lot of that, it's kind of surrounds these thoughts that we see in the world. And it's not about going out there to change everybody. First, we have to start with our own inner garden. And as time goes on, we will make the impact that we need to make, because once we have gotten our own inner garden cultivated enough or where it needs to be, that's when we can go out into the world and to be authentic and express ourselves in such a way that people see the nourishment, they see the light that we bring, the sunlight, the nourishing power that we bring. So everything always starts within first, and that's where it stops. We can stop things from occurring by controlling our thoughts, helping to control our thoughts. We can help to put an end to it, or we can continue to enable those thoughts, or we can align with our truth that we are here to be a reflection of the truth. This is Timika Chambers. This went over a little bit longer than I normally do. I hope that it's been helpful. And if you know of anyone that could benefit from this discussion or the Seeds We Plant series, Misalignment versus Alignment, please share it. And I thank you so much for listening. I thank you so much for subscribing. Don't forget, I have notes on life, empowering you to be you. It's not, it's, if I feel like anything I got from the cycle of pain, and I've gotten a lot, is that if I can help people, if we can be more of who we are naturally, the core of our being, if made out of love, if we can be who we are, then a lot of this stuff will be taken care of anyway. We'll have more thoughts of inclusiveness and unity. We won't need people to tell us to be that way because we will already know that that's who we are and that's what we're here to do. We'll see a change in how we eat and how we speak and how we live. I'll talk to you soon. Take care of yourself. As always, make this lifetime great because the power to do so resides within you.